The world is saved. The living room's dark, save for light being cast from the big TV screen and the imminent sunrise that's teasing the one starry sky with whispers of morning.
George, how are you?
Pretty good, Lyons. How about yourself?
Doing good. I'm doing, not so good that I would come home after work and, abuse my pet gorilla, because that's wrong. But,
Wrong.
I understand why a plumber, I guess he's a construction worker at this point. I don't know. The lore in this universe doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I mean, especially, he's clearly a somewhat successful plumber to have the means to have purchased and fed a great ape for that not insubstantial period of time.
I don't know. This strikes me as I think he's like the guy who works on the boat. Mario is the guy who works on the boat in King Kong. So he's not the eccentric billionaire who wants to go capture King Kong. He's just
he is now.
Well, yeah. Now. Yes, now. So what game do we play? We played Donkey Kong.
Yep.
Literally Donkey Kong.
Not Donkey Kong Country, not Diddy Kong's Quest, not Donkey Kong Math, which exists.
Did you ever play the crazy? Oh God, I think it was on the Wii. The bongos one.
No.
It was like a rhythm game, but it had a special controller that looked like bongos.
Real fast. I don't believe you at all. I don't believe any of this. I think that you're making it all up.
That's fair.
But no, I did not. I did not play that. No, actually, and to be fair, I have only vague memories of this game. Because I mean, this is like OG Donkey Kong, man. And
yeah, I mean, this actually, I think this is one of only a couple games we've played that literally predates us.
Yes.
I mean, this game originally was an arcade cabinet in '81.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, we were not born yet. And in fact, I think one might make the argument that our parents weren't even considering kids yet. It was almost surreal to kind of have this experience. I'm really glad to go back and play it, but I've got notes.
I have feelings. So this was I have to throw this in as an aside, just because this game it's an arcade. I mean, it's an arcade game in the truest sense, right? There's no ending. There's no nothing. There's just keep putting money in until you die.
Yep.
And I don't mean until Mario dies, because the money is what brings you back to life. I mean until you, the player, die. Just keep putting money into the box.
Until you drop below the poverty line.
Yeah, and then get out, poor guy. Come back when you have quarters. But I was curious because when we decided we were going to play this, you messaged me and you were like, do you know how short this is? And I was like, well, it's an arcade game. So, I mean, it's all about the high score. And then I sat down and played it and I was like, right.
Yeah.
So I looked up the high score for this game is just over 1.2 million points.
So, okay, I've actually got the game up right now and playing through it all the way through like one cycle, right? So killing Donkey Kong once.
Right.
And my current score, and to be fair, I wasn't going for score, I was just going to beat it, is at 5,800.
Mm-hmm. So
that, what that literally is? That's me being all right, I beat it. I beat the game. I'm at 5,800. And somebody's like, oh, I got a higher score. And it's that's they're I play it through 50 cycles. And you're like, what? It's let's put a number to that feeling, shall we? Last time I clocked in, my power level was over 1 million. That's
there's a whole bunch of fandom going on in there.
But no, I mean, that's literally when you said it was at 1.2 million. That's how I imagine Gohan, Vegeta, and Krillin felt when Frieza just dropped that number in. And it's just oh no.
Yeah, I mean, it took him, the world record holder, a guy named Wes. It took him 3 hours and 20 minutes of playing without a single death.
Well, oh, okay. So that's not even like, because like the console version has 3 lives, so not even that.
Yeah, so 3 hours and 20 minutes without dying a single time, just nonstop barrel leaping, flame dodging, gorilla killing.
Oh my god.
Yeah,
That's, I can't. I'm tired now. Podcast over.
no, that's fair. But we'll just give me like 90 more seconds, and we'll just knock out visuals, audio, controls, mechanics.
Got it.
Super fast.
It had visuals, it had audio, it had mechanics. The curtain falls.
Big bang boom. So the visuals. It's an arcade game, and one of the things about this era of arcade games that I just can't get over is like they didn't have the money for backgrounds. Like backgrounds were expensive, like computationally expensive. So
yes.
So they don't. So you just exist in a black void.
Like, that is correct. I mean, like, yeah, it is just girders against complete backdrop. That being said, I don't know. Like, to me, it looks like night, so it's not as disjointing visually as you would think, like to say, okay, well, what we're going to do is we're going to take a 2-dimensional plane and put it against nothing. You'd be like, whoa, there's no way that looks good. But it really does just kind of look like it's at nighttime, which would make sense because, Donkey Kong snagged Pauline, right?
Pauline, yep.
Yeah, snagged Pauline and then pieced out at night. And, that's why there aren't a bunch of construction workers and why apparently the construction workers just aren't that really happy. So they left just barrels of oil, like about,
open barrels of oil. And it's like, we have all these sentient flames on this construction site. Don't just leave the barrels of oil open like that.
It's like the just to keep doing references, it's like the flame from Futurama. Like, so Donkey Kong dumps a barrel into it and it emerges sentient and only wishes to be the supreme alderman of but yeah.
And I agree with you though that the graphics are like, they're kind of nice. Like, they're actually really pleasant. I mean, there are some things that are odd to me, like, why is Mario like half the size of Pauline? Or if you prefer, why is Pauline twice the size of Mario? Like, that's an odd, I don't know if that was a choice or if that was just like a design limitation, but like that seems a little weird. But like Donkey Kong like looks pretty cool. The girders, like you always know exactly like where the map is. Like nothing's ever confusing. The little flame guys are actually like kind of delightful. They're sort of cute. The graphics are, it's just freaking 1981.
Yeah, no, I mean, for considering the extraordinary limitations of what they were able to do, and what we've seen a lot of games do much more poorly with a lot more, like I think that, as far as a game that is 100% mechanics, like there ain't no real story behind this. You're not, you don't get to like Act 3 and there's the big reveal, that like that it was actually Luigi the whole time, but no, for a game that's entirely mechanics driven, I felt that the visuals themselves at no point did like Mario looks like a human, like it's very, very low res, and I know that and for the Pauline Mario height ratio, my best guess on that one would be that I know that the games, specifically Mario, has been praised for the ability to represent a human being with very, very few pixels, and that's why he has the mustache,
and overalls and hat. Like basically everything about him is because they were like, what if there was less of him, but we still had to convey the same amount of information?
Exactly. So it's like, well, how in the world can we make this not look crazy? It's like, well, if he has a mustache, then that gives you an idea of like where his nose is and then where his mouth and face is without actually having to put in a mouth. So I think that so Pauline has none of that, none of those affordances, right? She actually looks like a human woman as best as could be rendered.
Right.
So I think that if you that basically they needed Mario to be smaller because if he took up that much of the screen, then there would be less level, you know?
Yeah, no, that's fair. Like you couldn't have some of the very short ladders and some of the spots where the girders come really close together because it would crush him. It's not like they're gonna have a squatting mechanic.
Right. So Mario's size is a function of like they're like we need the human avatar sprite to be this size in order to play the game and do the level. So they did all this like cool, fun stuff to make Mario exactly that size, and they were like, well, he has to be saving Pauline. And it's like, okay, fine, human woman, just bam, done, you know. And yeah, I think that's probably the bulk of the thought that went into that.
No, that's fair, and I would say it's even possible because this has continued on through all. Like, I mean, Peach is way taller than Mario, and she always has been, and. Like Luigi is taller than Mario, which he wasn't at first because it was just a palette swap thing. But then like later, he was always shown as being taller than Mario. I think from Super Mario 2 on that became canon.
I think ever since they basically made him taller because they were ripping off Doki Doki Panic and
yeah.
But I mean, I think that is it possible that's why, because the sprite that they decided to do for Luigi like had that height.
Yeah, I mean that's almost definitely why.
That's crazy. Anyways, continue.
Yeah. But it is actually possible that they were like, yeah, we could render Pauline the same height as Mario, but she's just taller than him. I mean, like, and that if they made that decision intentionally, they then stuck with it. They didn't. I mean, Mario is not like a handsome leading man. Like he's a little fat guy. I mean, it's kind of amazing that, you know, he's God, what's that? There's like a name for that terrible stereotype where like in popular media, you can have like a way below average guy who somehow has this like smoking hot partner.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to call anybody out by name because that's disgusting, but like you can think of a million TV shows and movies where it's like, really? You two? Like, okay.
But yeah, no, I think that there's a name for that trope, although I am blanking on it. But yeah, no, I think that I think that basically Mario's dimensions are a function of necessity, and Pauline did not have those limitations. So therefore, they were either like, well, let's just make her taller, and therefore we can like flesh her out a little bit more and not do all these like weird affordances. One of the things I think that's kind of interesting is like so like all of the girders are theoretically at an angle. But because, like they can't actually, unless it's going to be at basically a 45-degree angle, they can only jump up a pixel. And so it is like, it's not like there's no smooth line. It is like you are here and then you bounce up a pixel. And so I thought that was just kind of like it's a little bit more jarring than you think it is. But if I remember correctly, later games actually had all of the girders even with each other, and then Donkey Kong like smashes something and then they all kind of like slam down an angle.
Ooh, yes. I mean, yes, that definitely does happen. I just don't know, because this was a time in history when the arcade version and the the Nintendo version, and then later the re-released Nintendo Classic version, and then the classic Nintendo version on Super Nintendo, and then the Wii GameCube port release for the Switch on the Wii U Nintendo Classics series. Like they're all like a tiny bit different. And this is a total aside, but this is something game companies are catastrophically crappy at. Like if I want to play like Sonic 2, and Sega says, hey, we're going to give away Sonic 2. We're going to let you download it on your phone, which is the thing they actually did. And it's like, oh, cool. And then you download it and they've wrapped it in like some dumb application. And it's like, no, the internet has already solved this problem. Just give me a ROM of the original cartridge. I do not need your dumb crap. Like, oh, but now there's a leaderboard and now you can like do saves at any point in the game. And I'm like, no.
I wanted the original Star Wars.
Yeah.
I didn't want.
I don't need the special editions. Yeah, you've made this demonstrably worse. And Nintendo they've never been nearly as bad at it as Sega has, but like in the early days of arcade games and like when the Atari was still kind of hanging on, like a lot of games that came home to the console, they would change sometimes because they had to, but sometimes to justify like, oh, hey, you know how you played this game in the arcade a million times? Well, now you should bring it home. I'm kind of done with that game. We changed it slightly. Shut up and take my money.
Yeah, and okay, so one that is absolutely thing. One of the things though that like just kind of like looking at this game though that and basically so we mentioned at the top of the episode, the game is about 15 minutes of there's 15 minutes of gameplay, right?
Yeah.
So realistically,
but it's 15 minutes of Groundhog's Day gameplay.
Yes, yeah, which is over and over and over again. But like realistically, like if you want to, you kind of have to look at this game not only for what it is like now, you know, but also for like some of the paths that it, you know, paved, right? And I'm sure that Nintendo has been analyzed by many people who are way more versed and have spent way more time analyzing it than me. But like I said, like for like the all of the girders being like off by a pixel, like I know that in one of the super ultra re-release fantastic super happy fun time releases of it, like where he does slam it and it does like just jarringly do that. I enjoy those kind of like fun callbacks, you know, where they kind of like say, look, the graphics used to be really awful, so but we're gonna own that, you know, like
this is how it looks. If you don't want that, maybe don't play this game.
Yeah, exactly. While we're on this though, I know that normally around in visuals is where we touch about like visuals and surface of gameplay, and then it's where we normally touch on hitboxes. And if they technically exist in a way a toddler can technically fight Muhammad Ali, you know.
So
like
I'm interested for where you're going with this, because I actually did not really have a problem with the hitbox. So
that's the thing, is that like it's not for a game that sells itself entirely on being mechanically, I mean, like I said, like there's no story, there's no interesting mechanics in the sense that, you know,
which,
it's
I mean,
like, oh, well, if I
in their defense, this was at a time in history when story-based games were not technically an option.
No, I mean, they were text-based. Like if you want a story-based game, it was a text-based, and you typed in like use whatever. Yeah, no, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that like
Throw game that baby. Do you get that reference?
Yeah. Throw baby. Oh, that sounds vaguely familiar.
Oh man. Okay, if somebody's listening to this and you got that reference, my Twitter handle's in the show notes.
But no, is that like, so there were a couple of times, but particularly with the ladders and hammer. So when I got hit, right, like that was fine. But there were a number of times when I thought that I was like dead on with the ladder, and I pressed up and I did not climb the ladder, and I needed to be climbing the ladder. Like if I pretty much, and because that's the thing, is because it's so mechanically intense, right? Is that if you are trying to do something, you need to be doing that thing. Like there's no, you know, like this isn't Assassin's Creed where it's like, oh, I'm going to try. Oh, I tried and ducked climbing the building, so I'm just going to duck into this barrel of hay or whatever the hell, right? You know, like if you try to climb the ladder and you for even a millisecond aren't climbing that ladder, you are just spread out all over that girder. You know,
and I actually had the opposite problem, which was getting off the ladder, because for some reason I was convinced the animation was like a frame or two less than it actually is. Because you know exactly what I'm talking about. Like every Mega Man game has the same thing where it's like the ass to camera shot, where it's just like,
oh yeah,
you know, like
the Mario money
yeah,
shot,
right at the top of the ladder when he's just like, hello there, and yeah, and that moment of like going over the top of the ladder, because you know sometimes there's something coming at you on the next level, but you're like, I can do it, I can make it up the ladder and then get over, and I would start to hold left or right when there was like still a whole additional frame of me climbing the ladder, and now I'm just sitting with my head sticking up from the ground right at flame height.
So like now I'm picturing like, you know, the camera is like even with the girders, like looking down, and you just see like Mario's dumb head like popping up slowly with like the big old smile, like, and then just bam, you know, like hit by the barrel.
Yeah.
So so I had trouble with the ladders and particularly with the hammer. And I think though that the issue with the hammer was less a function of the hitbox itself and more a function of the fact that I don't think that you can grab the hammer while jumping. I think you have to have your feet on the ground.
No, that can't be right.
Okay. I mean, maybe because like there were a number of times when like I jumped to grab the hammer and like I felt that I jumped and like was within the box of the hammer to like grab it. And again, it's just a couple of frames, but it was a couple of frames off from what I was expecting. And again, they matter.
So here's what I think is happening. You can't jump while you have the hammer, and because of that, there is no programming or design around what happens if you're using the hammer in the air. So you have to jump to get it once or twice, but then you don't start hammering until after you have hit the ground.
Interesting. No, that's
so I think what's happening is you were picking up the hammer during your jump, but then when you land, it's like, okay, are his feet on the ground? Now he's hammering.
Got it. And I think though that the game doesn't. And to be fair, I don't think I ever got hit during that space, to see like whether or not the game mechanically registers you as having the hammer. But anyways, no, that's interesting. But yeah, so there were a couple times where I was just kind of like, got to get the hammer, and then like I say, it's just a couple of seconds, but it makes it feel a little muddy. And also, to be fair though, again, like it's this game is. So far on Nostalgia Goggles, we've been sitting back and saying like, okay, we with our current modern day technology want to look at, technology in and around the Renaissance period, let's take a look back and see if, the aerial screw really holds up, right?
Totally does.
It does, but not Leonardo's invention. Dun, 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 dun. But now this is like going back like pre-Bronze Age, so there are just so many things that even back in like the NES days that they had kind of canonized a little bit. And especially with like what the degree of accuracy you need to be on in order to register like walking up a ladder or something like that, it's kind of hard to say like, oh, well, the hitbox was kind of crummy. It's like this was the hitbox. Like everybody, like if we're saying the hitbox was too narrow, it's like that's what a hitbox was, So it's kind of like a little bit harder to, I guess, critique it.
Well, and so much of that is because this is like all arcade games. The point is to just play forever, right? The objective is to play until you are no longer playing. So. Mm-hmm. You would eventually, like any other purely skill-based repetitive activity, if it's 8 frames to climb a ladder, you would just understand that. Like you would start to intuit that, and you would know exactly how long it takes to climb the ladder and exactly how quickly you can take your thumb off up and put it on the left or right so that you are standing still at the top of the ladder for the minimum amount of time. Like when you're playing and you die, it's super easy to just be like, oh, that's crap. Like he didn't even touch me. Like what the hell? But with a game that has pixels the size of quarters, like it's really unfair to say like, no, yeah, exactly the same thing happened every time because there's no room for error. Like there's no gray area. There's no like, well, because of the angle he was coming at you and because of the angle the camera was at, he actually did hit you. You just couldn't really tell. There's none of that. There's absolutely none of that. And even the bugs in games in this era are kind of elegant in their obviousness. When I was pulling up the Wikipedia article for the show notes, the tiny bit, we actually do for research, I think it was on the actual OG cabinet. When you got to level like or not level 22, but like the 22nd revolution, as soon as the round started, you just die. Like it was just
because they're like time to put in another quarter.
No, I mean like you just died over and over until you got a game over because there was probably some array somewhere that was like, well, nobody's ever going to get that high. And right. So yeah, I mean, it's just like, how big should we make the box? And it's like, I don't know, like a foot. Like, who needs to store things that are bigger than a foot long? And it's like, well, I need somewhere to park my car. And it's like, well, you're not parking it in this box.
Too bad. Yep, try again. That's interesting, and I do agree with you. And now's as good a time as any to get into this. So the game is ruthlessly consistent, right? And like, we can definitely touch on this more mechanics, but I mean, the visuals, like you said, like it is. You may not like the way that it does it, but it is just ruthlessly consistent, right? So now,
I may not agree with your mechanics, but I will defend to the death your right to have them.
Yeah, and then that's the thing, is that like in a skill-based game, it has to be consistent. You know, if you want to say to a player like, we want you to get super, super, super good at this, it has to work the exact same way every time, and this game does. And I thought that this game was an interesting metaphor for life. So
Go on.
bear with me. No, because okay, so it basically like so it does it does get a little bit harder, but mostly you play it and you just play it and like stuff comes up and you've got to you got to get over these obstacles, right? And the thing is that the world always operates the way that the mechanics are going to operate. You know, like sometimes the game may do something that you don't expect, but then once you've seen it a few times, you can learn to anticipate it, learn to move. And the thing is that eventually you die.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Like eventually you are going to make the mistake that compounds so badly that you just can't recover from it, right? And maybe that's enough free radicals building up in your system that, you know, like you die of illness, or maybe maybe it's any number of things, but eventually it ends. You know, it just gets harder and harder and harder until you die. And I thought that was just, I don't know, kind of poignant in a way.
Yeah, I mean, this is a notable difference about video games that I remember. I wish I could remember the game I was playing when I had this conversation with my father, but I remember as a child playing a game, because sometimes they would let me hook my system up to like the big TV in the living room. And so, so like, I was playing, you know, like Final Fantasy IV, something like a very story narrative heavy game, and talking to him about why he didn't like playing video games. And he was like, this is not a video game. And I was like, what? I was like, what do you, yeah, yes, it is. Like, yes, it is. And he was like, no, what I think of as a video game is like an arcade game where like you're trying to get a higher score. And then when you don't want to play anymore, you're done. He's like, you have like a book that you have to play. And I don't think he was being dismissive, but to him, there was nothing attractive about that experience. And to me, there is very little I can empathize with, or I can sympathize with why someone would enjoy a gameplay experience like this, but it's difficult for me to empathize because I don't just need numbers to be larger. Like, this is the same reason that I never got sucked into Facebook games, and I never got sucked into, like, you know, cow clicker style, like, can you make the number larger? And it's like, yeah, I mean, I enjoyed playing this. God, we're doing this whole episode like all out of order. Where it's like I enjoyed playing it, but it's like eventually, whether or not the game beats me, you just put the controller down and you're like, okay, I'm done. I'm just done.
Yeah. And interestingly, and this bears on what you're talking about, and so we might as well touch on it now because it doesn't really fit. It would fit better in mechanics, but it's worth talking about, which is that
here we are.
Yeah, here we are. So, and I may have mentioned this on another episode, but have we discussed Bartle's taxonomy before?
Yes.
Maybe.
No, we have. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, just, you know, so that way you don't have to go back and find the episode where we did before, under Bartle's taxonomy, and this is mostly about MMOs, but I feel that it's kind of indicative of all gamers, is there are 4 player types, right? So there's achievers, explorers, socializers, and killers, right? So achievers want whatever the in-game stated goal is, right? Explorers want to explore the game, right? Socializers want it for the social aspect of socializing with other human beings, and killers want to kind of grief people, right? So the way that it actually works on a spectrum, which I think is very interesting, which is that it's on the like x-axis is people and environment, right? and then on the y-axis is acting on or interacting with, right? So achievers like acting on the environment, explorers like interacting with the environment, and socializers like interacting with people, and killers like acting on people. And there's a whole lot of philosophy that you can pull into that with like people in real life, but but this game is 100 or 99.9% achiever. That's the player type that this plays to. Like if you want to see the numbers go higher, the in-game goal. There's a 0.1% for explorer, which plays out in about 15 minutes. Yep. And then it's all achiever, baby. It's achiever all the way down, you know? So with that in mind, I mean, like, I don't think either of us are achiever-based players. So, I mean, this game just doesn't, and game type doesn't appeal to us because we're like you said, I don't care how I was happy with my 5800. Honestly, when I got through all three stages, because generally I tend to be more explorer type. So once I got through all three stages, I was like, oh, I beat the game. And that, to me, like in my mind, I was like, and I'm done now. Like, what's the point of continuing to play? Like, I beat it. I beat the game. And then people are like, well, you can never beat the game. The score can always go higher. I'm like, no, what? Why? Why would I even want that? Like, I don't even, it's like, well, because the score would be higher. And it's like, yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Well, I think the difference is the achiever goal, like the stated goal is make the number go higher, whereas like in a narrative driven game, the goal that you're trying to achieve is to see the narrative play out. So I think not only is there, you know, like all the quadrants you could fall into, like depending on where you fall on the spectrum, but there's also probably some autonomy in the attraction of it. So you play a game like Overwatch or like PlayerUnknown Battleground, and it's like, well, the object of this game is to kill people, and I'm all out of bubblegum, right? So it's like I'm here, I'm doing what I'm here to do, but also the stated goal is this other specific part of the quadrant. Whereas like seeing a narrative all the way through is an achievement I am super down for. Making numbers go higher is not an achievement I'm super down for. So there's the A game and the B game. So like I went all the way through the first time and I was like, oh. And then I went all the way through the second time and I was like, oh.
Oh. And to be fair, I think that you have more achiever in you than I do, because like you said, like if you wax completionist, right, then that's putting you more on the achiever spectrum, you know? Like, so I would argue that, you know, like for seeing the story play out, like that's both an achiever and an explorer would like that. Like for me, I want to see the story play out because I want to know what the story is, right. You know? I want to explore it, right? Some people, and I think that to a large degree is like why you want to see the story as well, right? But then for the people who want to get through the game to say that I beat it and beat it in its entirety, so like the people for Final Fantasy that like get all of the summons and they get all of the bells and whistles and all of that stuff, like because they want to have completely dominated and acted upon the game, that's more of the achiever type. And I think that being able to say, and you know what? Ooh, no, now I'm thinking about it. This game does. This game can play to killers a little bit, and I mean that in the taxonomy sense because I just heard that out of context and that didn't sound right. But no, is so if you go back in time to like the early '80s when this was a thing, right? You could totally grief other people by having a higher score. So So basically, then you could say like, well, why do you play Donkey Kong? It's like, well, because I want to have the highest score versus I want to have a very high score.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah. That's true. Or maybe you just really hate those little flame guys.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, just murder them all with my big hammer, which is actually, I think, a really good place to talk about audio because there is not a lot of it and most of it's horrible, but there's one really important piece of audio, which is it's the little hammer tune.
Yep. Yeah, it is. Yeah. Yes, sir. Yes, it is.
Not just because it's like charming and delightful, but it's just so much Smash Brothers. So much Smash Brothers. And funny, you know, you're talking about this big coordinate plane. When you get the hammer tune in Donkey Kong, you're like, haha, I'm empowered now and it's going to help me achieve my goal. When you get the hammer in Smash Brothers, it's to help you grief other people.
Oh yes, yeah. No, whenever you get that hammer and you're like, this is it. And I really loved it. While we're just talking about Smash Brothers, in later games, my favorite thing was being Marth, and somebody'd come after me with the hammer, and I'd use his counter move, and just wreck. Oh god, that was. And then that's the killer in me, because I was just kind of like, oh, that was just so satisfying. They're like, I got the hammer. I'm like, advance towards my position, brethren. Dost thou even hoist? You know, like. Yeah, so no, but the minute I picked up that hammer, it was like do 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 do. I was like, ah, and then I actually started picking up hammers more than I needed them, because I just wanted the little tune, and then that kind of got played out because I realized that the hammer kind of a double-edged sword.
Can't go up and down ladders.
No, you cannot. So
can't jump. I mean, you don't technically need to jump over anything, but
you can't. I mean, and I like having the option. You know?
Well, and this is so musically for this game. I think it's relevant to point out that little tune is like it for music. So there's on the title screen, when you select a game mode, it goes like da na 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 na, and then that's it for music until you pick up a hammer, and then that's it until you finish a level or a screen, I think they were called. And it does a little victory chime, and that's it. I mean, there's like 3 pieces of music in the entire game, and I mean, could you imagine like when you are like, okay, this is all of the computing power we have. Are we going to have background music? No. We're going to make every single step that Mario makes make a god-awful squeaking noise that will make players want to die.
Yep, pretty much. I now I'm kind of like, I would love to see a modern game use, and I'm sure that they exist, but like that kind of minimalistic, like what would that even look like if you started off trying to make a game saying, I want to use 3 like audio cues, like three little like sound bites, and like 5 sound effects, and that's it. With all of our modern technology, using just that amount of sound, I want you to make an immersive experience with that constraint.
I can almost guarantee you there's an entire section of the Steam store where every indie everybody who thinks they're going to be the next super indie amazing person has some crappy game where they gave themselves a bunch of clever constraints and then didn't ship anything interesting.
Yeah, probably. Well, you know, what we'll go ahead and do is double check the Steam store, and we'll give a list of games in the show notes.
Yep. This actually, if you ever watch the special features for Wreck-It Ralph, so there's a part where they're, you know, because I mean these are Disney Pixar artists. Like these people are some of the greatest artists of our age, and they are being forced to do things in this super blocky, right angles only, even number of pixels, or not even number of pixels, but like whole pixels. You can't do fractional pixels. And like, oh, but it would just make more sense from this angle if like we just had like some fractional pixels. And it's like, nah, can't do that. And like some of the artists are just like, this is so infuriating. And it's like but it, you know, constraints like can make you do interesting things. So, you know, when you said you know, the visuals make it look like it's just nighttime, and the fact that there's no music means that all of the sound effects are directly serving gameplay. Like they had to be clever because they had the computing power of a calculator. I mean, it was nothing. Yep.
No, your cell phone would run circles around these arcade cabinets like at light speed. So I mean, my only final note on the sound, because there's not much of it, is just that the positive sounds are like very generic but good. You know, like enjoyable. So like when you jump over a barrel, it's like that sound of you got points. Yeah. It's enjoyable. It's good, you know. So that's, again, as we've said before, is you want the thing, if every time like it did that, it made like this like buzzer noise, you know, I'd be like, yeah, maybe I don't want to jump over this stuff anymore. So So I did enjoy that. That was nice. But realistically, there's not much else to say about sound because there's not a whole lot of sound to this game.
Yeah, my feeling is that the limited number of sounds are like the walk noise, like that I don't believe that benefits you as a player in any way. It does not need to make that horrible squeaky noise every single step that Mario takes.
Yeah, I don't know what that's about.
Yeah, right. And then on the screen with I think it's the second one with the elevators, and he's throwing the spring traps, and every time one of them falls, it goes like it's like a slide whistle. It's like a doo, but he throws them constantly the entire time you're playing that screen. So if you are going the low road or you're trying to jump over flames and get the purse and the parasol to get the extra points, like you got to hear that like 1,000 friggin' times. And I was just like, I'm already making a horrible squeaky noise everywhere I walk. It's like I'm wearing wet boots. Like, it's like I would rather just have no noise. Like you can make a noise when it bounces, but you don't have to do the slide whistle every time because you're almost incentivizing me to finish the screen just so I don't have to hear the slide whistle anymore. It's kind of a weird. It's like I get it. I get why they were like, oh, we have sound effects. We want you to hear them. And it's like, okay, do you have any other sound effects? No, we're just gonna keep playing this one.
Well, and that's the thing is that even if it did incentivize you to be like, I'm just going to plow through this level so I don't have to hear the sound anymore, give it another 5 minutes because you're going to be right. You're going to be right back there,
Oh God, yeah. But it's yeah. I can't. I mean, yeah. There's noise. Like there's. I'm with you. There isn't much else to say.
Yeah. So to mechanics, controls, gameplay, all that fun stuff. So I'm getting a kick out of this because I'm going through my notes. So generally speaking, when we're playing these games and like I have like a thought or something I want to write down, I write it down immediately because you don't want to forget, right? So you pause the game, take the note. And one of my one of my notes is varied level design, and I took this note on level 3 because I was like, no, each of these levels are very different, and it's good, because the first one's like it's like you're moving side to side, and then the second one there's a lot more jump like goals, and then the third one like they actually introduced this kind of mechanic of like you're finally able, because everything else is like you ducking, moving, dodging, but you're finally able to impact the realm. Like you can impact the game and actually attack Donkey Kong.
The name of that screen is rivets because you're pulling out the rivets.
Is that what you're doing? Because I thought I was melting the cake that was holding these areas together. Because it's not. It's not
super clear.
But all that being said, I was just like, no, this is good. This is good. So stopped the game, took the note, and then like it went back around. I was like, oh, oh. But anyways, I did feel the need still to say that each level is focused around like in my opinion, like a very specific mechanic, right? So like the first level is focused around like climbing the ladders, right? And so like timing your climbs, also sort of stuff. Yes, there is jumping over barrels, but you could go through the level without ever jumping realistically over a barrel if you timed your hits on the ladders right.
Yeah,
right.
Good.
And then the second one is all about jumping for like platforming, actual platforming.
Yeah, like if you duff a jump, you fall and die.
Right. And then the third one is, about like going and touching all of these different specific areas, like in a certain order and all that sort of stuff. So I was like, so each of those was very different, and then they were done. Mm-hmm. And to speak on one of the things that you just touched on that I definitely want to touch on is I felt, and maybe this is just me, being coddled by the nice warm embrace of current modern video games. I thought it was super unclear exactly how far you had to fall before you would land safely or die.
Yeah, it's not far.
It's not far, but like it's based, I think, off of like your original, like because so in later Mario's, especially in Super Mario Brothers, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, there's no fall death. Like you could fall infinitely. You can fall in a pit and die.
Yeah,
but you won't.
So in all of the 2D Marios, there's no height you can fall from that kills you that I can think of. In some of the 3D Marios, I think this is true for like 64 and Galaxy and Sunshine, if you
Mhm.
because you had a little health pie, and if you fall
Right.
far enough, you will take damage. And then in Super Mario Odyssey, no matter how far you fall, you don't take damage. But the way they punish you is when you hit the ground, you stop and it does the like quiver like all the way up
Mm.
his legs where he's like and
My shins.
right and yes are in my neck yeah and yeah so during that time like an enemy might attack you or you might otherwise take damage because you can't move until that little animation is done. So yeah, to be this Mario who can't fall more than the height of his own footsteps without
Yes.
dying.
Yeah, no, it's like so. And just to touch on the 64 thing, yeah, I know like with 64 and Galaxy, yeah, you fall a certain distance, you can like I think lose health and then die. But if you hit the ground pound button right beforehand, you don't take none's damage, which I thought was always kind of a cool little clever mechanic.
Well, it's also
Um,
it's that there is an interesting question about why Mario's butt is so much more durable than his legs.
Well, or why? So, it's not the fall that kills you; it's the sudden stop at the end. Why suddenly arresting his momentum 2 feet off of the ground makes him take so that way he can turn around and then fall the remaining 2 feet is better than having just hit the ground. Like he's still stopping entirely. That it doesn't matter whether he's hitting the ground or air. It's the sudden stop at the end.
That's true. I mean, technically, if you suddenly stop for any reason, it. Yeah, I honestly never thought about that. Like you are suddenly stopping as if you struck a solid object. Therefore, you would have the exact same negative repercussions of striking a solid object. But I'm just still too confused by his like invulnerable butt cheeks. So
Yeah, no, I think it's honestly like what is it? Mario has the thing from The Incredibles. He has 0 point energy.
yes, that's surely it.
Yep. Where it just basically he is able to just lose all of his momentum.
Yeah.
But anyways, we digress. This game is actually more realistic in the sense that if Mario falls more than like, and I don't know the exact amount because I definitely didn't stress test it, but being used to 2D Mario games and being able to fall infinitely, like at one point I jumped from one area onto a girder, and I was like, like I missed the one I was going for, but I'll just land on the one below it dead. I was like, oh, good God. Okay, so then there was one where I remember jumping and being like, I should have waited like another second for it to get like a little bit higher before I jumped. And no, the game was not having it. I died, and I was like, man, that's really super sensitive. So
yeah, I think it's like one Mario height. Like if you fall more than your sprite height, you die.
Yeah, which is pretty. I mean, again, the game is it's a skill based challenge. It's pretty unforgiving.
It's really unforgiving, and also the each screen adds times where that is a likely cause of death, where just traversing the level might kill you because you jumped to a girder that's slightly lower, or you like on the third screen with the rivets, if you fall through one of the rivets because it's large enough for you to fall through,
big rivets,
the huge rivets, but you can fall through that, and then of course you die because it's like 2 or 3 sprite heights. And while we're just talking about like controls and mechanics, just kind of like loosely related to this, is more than once I caught myself like coming usually down a ladder, and there's like a little flame guy coming and trying to jump off the ladder. It's like the game's not going to let me do that. Like they in their wildest dreams did not imagine programming the ability for Mario to jump off of the ladder to escape a flame or a barrel. Like that's just not a thing. Of course that's not a thing, but that's like my modern sensibility. Just like, oh man, there's an enemy coming, quick, jump off the ladder. No.
And I mean, to be fair, even now, like games are getting better and better about like making environments more and more like interactive. For example, with Arkham Knight, I remember how giddy I was when Batman. He's spoilers if you haven't played it yet. I mean, minor ones towards the beginning. But
Bruce Wayne's parents die.
But anyways, when you're like trapped behind the glass, and like they frame it perfectly, where it's like the camera's over Batman's shoulders, and you're looking down this path, and it shows you the Batmobile, and the Batmobile has like this like anti-riot gear, and you're like, there's no way they're gonna let me control the Batmobile. This is a cutscene. And you like press a few buttons, you see the Batmobile like respond to you, and you're like, no, shut up. And then like you hit the button and it stops the cutscene and it like moves on. I was like, I remember when that happened, I was really floored that the game let me do that, because I was like, there's no way that they would let me interrupt a cutscene, So this is the opposite of that, where they're just like, I mean, imagine the giddy glee that a player first felt when they tried knee jerk to jump off a ladder and the game let them,
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's like there are whole platforming challenges in like later Mega Man games where you're on a ladder and then there are like floating platforms and you have to jump off the ladder to get to the platforms. And if you decided to not go high enough on the ladder, you fall and die, because it's not like you can grab onto the ledges of things. So this is definitely something that they may have been dreaming about. Like, I may be selling them short saying they never even dreamed of it, but they definitely did not have the ability to program it into the game, because like then it's way more freaking complicated, right? And it makes the skill part of it more complicated. It makes the programming that much more complicated. So it's just like worse all around for this era of computing power. But I wonder how long it would take me to shake those kinds of things. Like how long would I have to play this? How much time would I have to put in before I'm like, okay, I'm no longer trying to jump off the ladder when I see a barrel coming at me and panic.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And one of the other mechanical things I had this note under mechanics, which is there were poor affordances in some cases. So overall, I feel that the visuals were pretty good. But I can honest to God say that if not for you telling me the title of Stage 3, I would have never guessed that those little blocks were rivets, right? And so...
No, that's fair. I only know that because I had the Wikipedia article in front of me.
So yeah, I would have never guessed that. And a part of me wants to like, so now I'm picturing, what what it looks like in real life. So, Mario's running across like this giant construction area, right? And there is a man-sized rivet, like holding two of these things together. And Mario, because all he has to do is walk over it and it disappears, right? So without breaking stride, Mario like runs by, like digs his hand like into the metal of the rivet and uses his forward momentum to like gain enough spin. His muscles cord across his body as he just rips this rivet like completely out of the structure, and it doesn't break stride, just keeps moving towards the next rivet. I mean, I'd be terrified. Clearly he is on extensive drugs and has superpowers, like both,
But Mario, because that's like the dark, gritty 90s reboot Mario. What's really happening is he makes like a cute noise, like a wahoo, and then it just disappears seemingly into nothingness.
That's true. That's true. That's probably what actually happens in Mario. Yeah. Well, no, actually, what he does is he takes off his sentient hat, throws it onto the rivet, and it just drills itself out.
Okay, so here's a fun thing about that. I'm pretty much done with Super Mario Odyssey. Like, I've done most of what I want to do with that game. But the game is just like, hey, what if nostalgia? And not in a bad way. Like, it's done in an incredibly thoughtful and entertaining way. And one of the places they do that is when you go to the weird like city level where there's like weird human proportioned humans. Pauline is the mayor of New Donk City.
Nice.
Yeah. And it's like kind of interesting to see her in like a full like 3D render, because they had to decide what she was going to look like since they didn't have much to base it on. But there's like a bonus thing you can do where she's like, oh, it's my birthday, and it'd be nice if maybe like you got me a present, you big jerk. And so there's 3 objects scattered around the city. One of them is a hat, one of them is a parasol, and one of them is a purse. And I was just like,
Of course.
right. But see, this is the thing is I did this quest thing with her just like, I don't know, a couple weeks ago. And I was just like, I'll bet there's a reason that it's these specific, incredibly pink objects, but I don't know what it is. And then I got to the second screen in Donkey Kong, and I literally paused it, and I was like, "Sue, look."
Hey, check it out.
I see what they did there.
But yeah. So I'm sorry. So affordances. So yeah, like I didn't feel that in the rivets stage that they did an amazing job initially, like compared to modern game standards. Basically telling me what it was I was supposed to do, because every other stage up until now was go find and save Pauline, right? And then this one, Donkey Kong's just in the center, So I went up to Donkey Kong, as I had been doing so far, and tried to jump on him and just straight up died. And so I was like, okay. And then it was the second or third time I was playing that level where I, was like, all right, well, what do I do? And it wasn't until that, like, there were way too many fireballs on the screen that I thought maybe I'm supposed to be eating these pies that are holding together I don't know. And so then, I did that, and then he dropped, and I figured it out. But again, 3 levels. Like the game's made to eat quarters. So yeah, there weren't great affordances, but I mean, at this point, the game wasn't trying to reach a broad market, and it wasn't trying to like entice people. It wasn't trying to be affordative. I don't know if that's a word.
Now it is.
But yeah, they weren't trying to do that. They weren't trying to lead you through a gaming experience. They were trying to create a game that was enjoyable enough to continue to put quarters into, but hard enough to continue to put quarters into. So, like, I get it.
So here's the thing: you're not in the gutter of stupidity alone, because I also went to the top not to kill Donkey Kong, but in the first 2 screens, you just have to get close enough to Pauline, because what they added in later is when you get near her, he grabs her and climbs up. So each screen is actually climbing to the top of the building that's being constructed.
Got it.
Right. And in this, like, cause we played the NES version of the arcade port. So there's no animation of him grabbing her and then climbing further up. So when I got to the 3rd screen, I was like, well, in the first 2 screens, I just had to get near Pauline, and then the screen was over. So I got up there, and like nothing happens. And I was like, so do I rub his nose in it? Like, so I like jumped at him and I died, and I was like, well, that's clearly not it. And then I actually had a moment where I was like, okay, they have an incredibly small amount of computing power, and they have none of history to assume that I know how video games are played. So the only things they are communicating to me in this game are things I absolutely must know. So when I jumped over the first little, pie and it disappeared, I was like, well, obviously that's what I'm supposed to do, because it's the only thing that's different. And I think at this time in history, and for a long time, like even into modern gaming, because humans are so good at pattern recognition, like you could play a game like a Batman Arkham Asylum or an Assassin's Creed or some like super modern game, and I bet if you look at like a thing they want you to do, it's like, oh, it's literally the one that's different. How do I know where to use the bomb in Legend of Zelda? It's the only part of the wall that looks different. How do I know who's the bad guy? It's the only person who's not wearing generic, tan colored clothing. It's like there's so I feel like that, like part of me agrees with you. Like they don't really communicate that that's the mechanic of the level, and you kind of have to piece it together. But it's also the only thing that's different, and it's the only information that's being communicated to you. He's not also throwing barrels. There isn't also the spring traps. It's like there's nothing else to pay attention to.
Yeah, I agree. And like I said, like, it didn't take me forever, but I think that the issue that I had with it was that they had been building you to believe that you are supposed to do thing A, and they don't redirect you before you find out that you're not supposed to do thing A by death, which is the only punishment mechanic. So like they can't just like gently redirect you, you just die. But again, they want your quarters, they want your money. And on top of that too, I think that it's worth saying that originally when this game was made, it was in an arcade. So I mean, while yes, like the first time this happens, if you they may be relying on some degree of you having a Sherpa in the sense of the chance of the very, very first time you've ever seen this game played, you're playing it is actually not super high. The chance of being the first time you're seeing it played is somebody who is already experienced on how to play it.
Right.
So they show it to you first, and you're like, oh, okay. And it does make sense. It's not so far out of the realm that it's not missed, So that's so far out of the realm where you're just kind of like, I would have never put that together. But I did feel that they didn't do a good job with like redirecting you without killing you, and that does put on one of my final notes, which is I felt it really fascinating to. I don't want to say like have the rug pulled out from under me, but as we've been playing all these games, I did what you did, which is rely on a little bit on my knowledge of games, game mechanics, game development for like, well, what's the game developer like you try to think of it in like a meta sense, like what is the game developer trying to tell me, like how I don't know what to do, so if I were a game developer, how would I lead somebody from here? Can't really rely on that the further back you go in time, because there's definitely been a number of times, especially with the way older games like the early NES and some of the arcade ports, where I'm like, I can't rely on the fact that I'm not going to be punished for this behavior, because I don't deserve to be punished for this behavior, but I might still get punished for this behavior just because they haven't realized that that's not a great thing to do to players.
Yeah, they hadn't written the rule book. They hadn't made these decisions, and they hadn't established best practices based on a huge library of games, because there wasn't a huge library of games. And you hinted at something that I don't think I've ever considered before, because I'm not a huge arcade goer. Like, I had access to arcades when I was a kid, but if I played arcade games, it was almost exclusively the home ports of them. There is a very real chance that arcade games were designed not just with the technological limits of the time, because I mean, every game is designed with technological limitations, but there's a very good chance that they were designed knowing you would almost never play it alone. Whereas modern games are, I mean, unless it's like a social game, but like most modern single player video games, they probably expect you to be alone. So like if you are designing a game like Donkey Kong, you can imagine there's somebody sitting there and they get to the third screen and they walk over one of the rivets and it disappears, and then they don't know what to do and they end up dying, and just being like, what the hell? And the person at like the next machine over just literally going, oh, well, you have to make all those things disappear, and then Donkey Kong falls down. Like, you could actually design that into your game, because you know that there are going to be other people around. People are going to stand there and watch, like you were saying, like the first time I see someone fight Donkey Kong is probably not going to be me playing. It's probably going to be me watching over the shoulder with my quarter on the screen because I want to play next, right? So it's like you could build game experiences knowing that was the environment in which they would be interacted with. Like, you could build a very different kind of Simon game if you knew it was going to be played in zero gravity, and you could push on it from all sides, like that's just a different kind of experience. And I've never really thought about it like arcade game design that way, because I just never really played in arcades.
Yeah, I definitely think, and I also think that too, not only is there like the social aspect of it, and just bring it back to Bartles taxonomy, that there's the social players, right? The people who are at the arcade mostly to socialize and kind of play the game a little bit. But we got there. But yeah, so not only can you build a game around the idea that the first time you see it, it's probably not going to be you playing it, and there's going to be a lot of other people around. Also, too, I think something that's worth remembering is there weren't many, as you hinted to, there weren't many games during this time, right? So, like one of the things that I kind of, I don't know fully how I feel about it, but so many movies nowadays rely on some kind of brand recognition, right? So
whenever I'm fighting Terminators, I like to quench my thirst with a ice cold Coca-Cola.
yeah, exactly, or something like that. But for example, I know there have been a number of, and this is not uncommon in Hollywood, where basically somebody will write a screenplay and people will be like, yeah, great, that, but Die Hard.
That is one of my. I'm not a huge cinemaphile, but knowing that that's how a lot of terrible movies get made is one of my favorite. Backstage secret. What do you call it? Like insider knowledge, like inside baseball.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like a lot of stuff like that, gets made because they're. And sorry, I swear to God, I'm bringing this back to video games it's because there's just so many movies. Like Megan and I were at the movie theater recently, and I was just looking at all of the posters, and I got a little frustrated at one. I think it was at Ferdinand, because basically that movie, and I was like, I'm pretty sure that that's based off of a children's book, and it is. And oddly, it was one that I read a lot as a kid, and then that had its own weird flashback. But yeah, so I was just kind of like, it's frustrating. I was like, man, it's kind of a bummer that they don't really make original stories for movies that much anymore compared to pulling from other sources of literature. I was like, but the market is so flooded that I got to admit, as much as I hate myself for it, I am more likely to go see that movie because it is a remake of a book I had as a child than to see an original thing, because there's 50 things to see. You're never going to have time to see all of them. You're only going to have time to see 10. And so you want to pick the 10 that you want, so you're much more likely to go see something that you're already familiar with, right? With all that being said, back in the 80s, right, the late 70s, early 80s, that was not the case. There were like 3 movies or 2 movies playing, so everybody saw them, right? Because there wasn't much else to do, right? The same thing with these video games, right? Is that there was like 10, 20 arcade cabinets, right? So if you went, I mean, there was probably more, but there was like 10 or 20 popular ones, right? So you went to the arcade, like everybody knew Donkey Kong. Like everybody knew this game. Everybody knew how to play it. It was just, you probably even knew about the rivets and how to beat Donkey Kong before you even saw the cabinet, because that's what, if you had friends that played video games, play arcade games, then that's what you talked about. And then so you already had a vague concept of it beforehand. And then by the time you walked in, they, then showed you how to play it, because God knows they wouldn't let you play first, you neophyte. and then, so you actually have so much leading into it. The game, they could probably build games relying on the fact that you would have knowledge of games beforehand, in the same way that Mary Shelley, when she wrote Frankenstein, assumed you had read Paradise Lost,
I wonder if and I mean, there's no way we can start to establish this without becoming like actual hardcore historians, but I wonder if you could see that problem spill over into home consoles. Like, how many early Nintendo and Atari games were the designers had all these baked in preconceived notions about social environment, and people are talking about our games, and there's only a handful of games, and blah blah blah. And it's like a kid sits down and unpacks a Nintendo and sits down to play a game, and it's like, I don't know what I do, and I'm alone. Like, there's no one to ask. There's no established norms. This game isn't giving me the information I need to make informed decisions. So there were probably some things about the early console games that were frustrating because they were on a console. And if you were playing them in an arcade and they were one of only a dozen games, and your buddy or your person at the next cabinet over was right next to you, where you could ask them, like, what the hell am I supposed to do right here? Like, those frustrations would not have been there. And I wonder what the adjustment period on that from a design perspective was like.
Well, and like you said, neither of us are historians, and so this is just my educated guess, but I do know that the market was wildly flooded when all of a sudden the cost of entry for making video games plummeted, because you were making them for home consoles, and you had to spend thousands of dollars building out an arcade cabinet, right? So with all of that in mind, I think that honestly that it was bad, and I know that it was bad because one of the big things that I think put Nintendo on the map was the Nintendo's seal of approval, because they knew that a good game couldn't rely on any of that stuff, you know? So like a good game needs to have these things, chief amongst them being, you got to teach your players how to play your game, and not just through the manual. Like, you have to just be able to sit down and learn how to play this game without any outside assistance or anything like that. So I think maybe the seal of approval was the Harry Seldon's Foundation for video game design. You know, it didn't get rid of the dark times. It just shrank them from 10,000 years to 1,000.
Man, that is a fantastic reference. Like, I'm just so like, I'm excited for that because, like, I really love that series, and like that's a good series. It's a really, except the last book, like. That's just like a really poignant way to wrap that up. I got nothing else. Just, did this game hold up?
With all of that in mind, like with everything that we just said, I would have to say yes. I mean, there's not a lot to it. It's like eating a potato chip. But I mean, as far as like, if you want a game where you really want to test to see if you can get a high score, yeah, play this. It's good. Yeah,
and I'm with you on that, because even though this is not my kind of game, because it's purely just make a bigger number. The bits that I played it, because I had to play it in several short bursts. Like, I could not play for an hour at a time. Not just because I'm not awesome at it, but I was like, okay, I get it. But for those short bursts, I was like, yeah, okay. Like, I see why people get into skill games. And if I kept that up over time, you know, if I dipped in for 10 or 15 minutes at a time every day and got like a little bit better over time, I could see those play sessions getting longer as I naturally needed to play longer to hit the edge of my skill level. So I don't think I would naturally seek out an experience like this, but considering how ruthlessly consistent it is, how incredibly clear everything is, once you've seen it the first time, you're like, okay, it's going to behave that way forever. It's like Simon, right? Like, the red light never turns polka dot just to screw with you. Like, it's red every time, always red. The barrels fall the same kind of way. The flames move the same kind of way. The hammer works the same kind of way. And yeah, I mean, I get it. Like, it's not for me, but I absolutely get it. And this is probably every bit as fun today as it was, 36 years ago.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree. And I think that this, like physics, so thus like life, I think you hit it on the head. Ruthlessly consistent.
The curtain falls, the music plays, the credits roll, then it all fades to black, and you're left by yourself. The fanfare is gone, there's no player two there by your side to share victories won. But as you slowly progress down the hall to your bed, a few great events leak back into your head from the time that you spent traversing the land, battling evil, fighting the darkness, just sword in hand. Your memories creep in with the edge of a smile. You realize again what you lost for a while. You're gonna think back much less on how you saved the day than on all the experience gained. At the end of it all, gamers play what we play, not for game over, but rather for what we take away. The world is sad, but who cares? We all know that that's not what you came for. Your next adventure's already in sight. You're all set to go. You're excited to see what's all wrong till it's right, and the world is safe. So you're more along for the ride.